Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on blockchain. You're all very, very welcome. It's great to see so many of you here today. I will just maybe start by sharing the slide deck, start with a few introductions. I'm joined by a guest speaker here today as well, and we'll introduce Shane in due course, and just give you an overview of what is going to be covered in the webinar today. So if I'll just share my slides with you here. It disappeared on me there. Okay. Well, look, as I said, you're all very, very welcome today. This is our first webinar in a series of webinars that we are running as part of the Clinton Leadership Institute here at the Queen Business School, in collaboration with the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. And we'll talk a little bit about the fund in another couple of slides. But I just wanted to introduce the series to you. As I said, this is our first one. We have a number of additional and follow-up webinars coming up in the next number of weeks, as laid out in the little table there. So we have data analytics, smart technologies, AI, and immersive technologies. And those 4 webinars and this one today is really there as a support to helping you understand the technologies a little further, to help guide you in terms of where you might apply the technologies in your organizations. What are the benefits of the technologies and challenges with some of these technologies as well. And on each of these webinars, we'll cover sort of the background theory behind the technology, but equally then we are bringing in some real world case studies into each webinar from typical businesses like yourself, small, micro, maybe medium-sized enterprises of where these technologies have been implemented, to give you a real better feel of the technology and what it might look like on the ground. The final webinar then, a really interesting one, is around digital transformation workshop. And this is one where we're running it in order to help you build your digital transformation plan, which is part of the requirements of the Flexible Fund application process. So this is a webinar. It will take you step by step through looking at what does a digital transformation strategy even look like? What are the contents? Where do you start? What types of elements do you need to put in there? So that's going to be a really useful, more hands-on type of a workshop for you there on the 25th of June. So do keep an eye on these as they're coming up. There's a little QR code there for you. Register your interest, come along to them. They will be recorded and available for viewing afterwards. So if you do miss one, that will be there for you. So just as I say, keep an eye on them as you go. So just by way of introduction today, so my name is Brenda Clerkin and I'm a lecturer of practice here within Queen's University. My background is mostly working in practice and industry. Okay, so I've worked with small, medium-sized enterprises right up to the large multinational companies. And through that time, working very much in terms of understanding where technologies can play a part within those organizations. And be that technologies and just in terms of general data entry points, but then equally looking at where technologies can be implemented to help achieve overall company or organizational strategy. So hopefully today I'll be able to share some of that experience with you. I also work have worked in our family business, which is in the construction industry. Absolutely fits into the small and micro-sized organizations. There's only about 7 employees in the company. So again, I know exactly the types of challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully then this webinar will open up some elements that might help alleviate some of those constraints and challenges that you might face through the use of digital technology. I'm also joined today by Shane McCarthy. Shane, delighted that you're here. Shane is the CEO and founder of Ireland Craft Beverages, which is a small micro enterprise here in Northern Ireland that has implemented blockchain in their craft beer production. So we're going to hear from Shane later on. He's going to share his journey that his organization has went through, looking at, well, why did they opt for blockchain? What benefits are they seeing from that? And equally then, what challenges have they faced on their journey too? So we'll look forward to hearing from Shane in due course. So just before I get into the detail, I suppose, behind the blockchain technology itself, I just wanted to cover off a couple of slides here, just as a setting the framework around, where this webinar fits in and what is it here to support. The Digital Transformation Flexible Fund is a 7.5 million capital grant fund. It's delivered by the local authorities. It's administered by Newrymorn and Down District Council, and very much supported then by Invest in I. The idea behind this fund is really there to help, first of all, small and micro-sized organisations, but it's to help them very much in the space of digital transformation. Okay, so I know very much, as I said, just from the own family business, there are a lot of constraints and challenges that you face as entities of this size, and those resource or constraints could be financial, they could be skill set, they could be capacity, lots of different constraints there. But one way that you might look towards trying to overcome some of these challenges would be through the use of digital technology. And this fund is really set up to help these small and micro-sized organisations like yourselves get the benefits of some of these technologies and help you sort of grow a little further and reach maybe new markets and launch new products as a result of gaining efficiencies from these technologies. The centre of the slide there talks about that it's there to help business transformation, okay, rather than digitalisation or digitisation. And we're going to talk in a few minutes' time about the difference of those two terminologies and what they actually mean. So that's a big part of the flexible fund. So to make sure that if you're applying for some grant funding through the scheme, that you're able to show how it's going to be transformative for your organisation and it's not in the digitisation space. A number of eligibility criteria there listed on the screen. I'll not go through them all, but you can scan your eye over them there. So in order to put an application forward for the fund, you have to be able to tick the box in terms of these eligibility criteria. Now, this is just a snippet of some of the remit around the fund itself in these couple of slides. I would encourage you then as well to go on and read through the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund website, and I'll give you the link to that in a minute or two. It has lots more information on there that will help guide you through the process and what the fund is there for, and therefore, help you decide whether or not it's going to be applicable to you. So what does the process look like? So if you do think this fund is applicable to you and you can get some benefit from it, there's a 6-stage process that you need to think about. The first one there is a pre-application briefing. So this fund is set up over a number of years. Throughout that period of time, there will be a number of different calls for funding. And we are just about to launch call number 3. Okay, and we'll talk about when that is in a minute. But this is just a session that we run to outline a little bit more detail behind the programme. So it covers off the types of technologies that are covered in the programme and there are by the fund, and there are 6 very specific technologies covered there. It goes through the application process, it goes through the timeline. So these pre-briefing sessions are really your first protocol to understanding the scheme more and prepping yourself for a future application. After that, then the EOI, or the expression of interest window, will open, and this is where you will put forward a short document around what it is that you're hoping to do. That goes through the ops team within the fund, and if you're successful through that, and it's successful in terms of a general idea and whether or not you meet the eligibility criteria that I just showed you there, it's not an indication that you're definitely going to get funding. It's a first stage sort of playing field just to express your interest in the fund. So if you are successful through that, then you will be asked for a more a fuller application form. So this is where you're getting into more detail about where this technology is going to work, the benefits that you're going to see from this technology, and how does it work towards your overall digital transformation. Okay, so what part of the journey is this sort of helping with? The application is then assessed, and it is assessed in a number of different ways. It's assessed within the councils as a first sort of level of assessment. It then comes to us within the Clinton Leadership Institute here at Queen's, and then there is a panel put together at the end. So it's a very sort of detailed, robust process around the assessment of the applications. If you're successful with that, then you will receive a letter of offer, okay, outlining, what value has been given to you in terms of the fund, but also the terms and conditions around what that fund capital grant is eligible for and the timeframes around it. And then after that, you implement your project. So you go out, you purchase your technology, you implement it, get it up and running on the ground, and then you make your claim back to the fund for the capital grant that you have been awarded. So, as I said, the very first step in this is to attend a pre-briefing session. As I said, we're on call 3. The pre-briefing session for this call is on the 17th of June. All right. A little QR code there will take you to the website, give you a little bit more information, or the link to the website is also available in the slides there. So please do come along to that session if you think that this fund is going to be some value to you and your organisation. After that, I should say that each of the councils within Northern Ireland will be running either in person or online briefing sessions. So again, sort of giving more sort of detailed information, further follow-up. It gives an opportunity for organisations to come into their local council, speak to a member of the QUB who will be there delivering the sessions, especially if you have any additional questions around maybe the application, the type of technologies. That's more sort of an informal setting than, say, maybe the pre-briefing session, which is open to everybody across Northern Ireland who has an interest in the fund. So after the pre-briefing session, do have a think about coming along to your local council sessions, just for that little bit more insight and information that might be useful to you. So just in terms of today's webinar, what we're hoping to cover, setting the scene, first of all, I mentioned that it's very important that you demonstrate as part of your application that the technology you're hoping to claim some funding for is part of a digital transformation. Okay, so we're going to look at the difference between digitalisation and digital transformation, just so you sort of have a clear line of sight as to the difference between the two. Then we're going to look at blockchain. Okay, so we want to get in to understand what it is, how it works, where we can actually use it. We're going to specifically focus today on supply chain, because that is one of the biggest growth areas we are seeing with blockchain. So where are companies using it? What types of benefits are they getting from that within supply chain? After that, Shane is going to share some knowledge on his journey in terms of his own organisation there, Ireland Craft Beverages. So it'll be really interesting to hear that. After that, I want to do some signposting for you, because you might want to learn a little bit more about the technology or the application process. And I have a number of resources that are available to you that you can pick up at the back end of the webinar. And then after that, we'll open it up to Q&A. So if you have a question, we'll pick it up at that point. But do feel free, if you have a question during the session, to type it into the chat function, and we'll pick all of those up at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the session, and we'll look at the difference between digitisation, digitalisation, and digital transformation. And very often, these three terms are used interchangeably, and I would say incorrectly so. And we do need to make sure that we are using the correct term, and it's very important for the flexible fund that you're using the correct term to describe what you're actually doing. So we talk about digitisation, and this is really the first step in using any digital tool or technology. This is where you're moving from your manual records, your analogue records, and putting them into some kind of digital form. And that might be just moving things into a Word document or an Excel document, or putting it into some kind of software like an ERP system or a CRM system to gather the data in one place and to have it in digital form. So that's the very first step that you need to do. And very often, as a small and a micro size organization, that's really where a lot of organizations sit, is just getting it into that digital space to begin with. Once you have that done, then you can move into digitalizing the business. And what that means is that you're now going to start to use technologies with this digital data that you've created as a foundation. So maybe you decide to implement a technology maybe at the front end of the business in terms of customer interaction. So maybe you decide to put in a AI-powered chatbot or something like that. Or then maybe you decide to improve your production process and you try to automate some of that. So it's using the digital data to help your business processes. The next term is transformation, so digital transformation. And I always like to think of this as a bit of an umbrella term because it's much wider than the other two and encompasses a lot more within it. So yes, of course, digitalization plays a part of that because you want to use your digital tools to help with your business processes. But there are a number of other elements that we would expect to see within a transformation, to be able to for you to demonstrate that you are actually transforming the organization rather than just digitalizing it. And that's, as I said, important for the business plan that you might put together to make your claim under the flexible fund. So what types of things would we expect to see as part of that? Well, digital transformation tends to encompass 4 particular areas. The first one there is around structural changes. So for digital transformations to be successful, and based on the research that we have, looking in on companies that digitally transform, those organizations that operate in quite a fluid manner or with a bit of agility to allow decisions to happen faster, to allow information flows to happen throughout the organization a lot smoother, they show signs of being more successful at being digitally transformed than others who maybe are very hierarchical. So maybe if you wanted to make a decision, it has to be approved by 2 levels up, and those 2 levels take time to approve, and there could be questions and a bit of to and fro, and that all slows down that whole idea of making those, of being agile and taking advantage of these technologies when they're here, and certainly before hopefully your competitors take advantage of them. So we'd expect to see some structural changes, removing of any, not all hierarchies, but some hierarchies to allow maybe decisions to flow faster, and also removal of the formalization of processes. Okay, so again, to allow decisions to be made quicker and to get the benefit then of the technology that's there. We'd also expect to see a cultural change. Okay, and that can happen in a number of different ways. So it might be physical changes within the organization. If I was to walk into one of your organizations today, what would I be able to see in order for me to understand how digitally transformed you are? And it could be a simple thing of having, your mission and your vision maybe at your reception desk, and within it you talk about being the digital business or how you're going to digitally transform, and that sort of sets the scene right from the minute you walk in the door. Or if I was to listen in on some conversations in the office today, what type of language and how would your organization be talking about various processes? Is it about being very manual, or is it more about being digital and using digital data and using data to make decisions? Or if I was to look around your office, do I see lots of lever arch folders and filing cabinets, which would suggest to me that you're maybe less of a digital business? So if you're going to transform, we'd expect to see some of these things changing. Okay, small changes, but help to cement the overall culture. So out with all the visual things that we might expect to see, there are also other things that we would want to see changing as well. So the values of the organization and the assumptions within the organization. So for example, in an organization that's digitally transforming, there needs to be an openness to continuous improvement. There needs to be an openness to try new things. And look, if you're going to fail fast, well, you'd want to know early. So a fail fast mindset, learn from it, and then move on. And that might be very different to the culture that's there in place already, particularly for organizations that have been established for long periods of time, where you're ingrained in your processes, you're ingrained maybe in hierarchies, you're ingrained in the formalized approach to doing things. And all of a sudden, to move in this digital world, it has to be a lot more fluid. So we'd expect to see some of those values starting to change, an openness to try new things, and a feedback environment that's very much encouraged, and a continuous improvement environment. To support all of that then, competency changes, absolutely. I mean, if you're introducing new technologies, who's going to operate them? How are you going to sort out any troubleshooting with them? How are you going to know if they're operating correctly or not? So there is going to be a shift change in terms of the competencies and the skill set within the organization. So, does that mean that you upskill your workforce to learn the technologies? Do you bring in experts into the organization to look after the technologies? Or how is that going to look? So that's part of that journey as well. And then, of course, you have the change in the digital infrastructure. So you have the IT changes. The IT stack is going to change. The technologies you're using is going to change. So these are the elements we expect to see in a digital transformation. Very often the focus is here in just terms of digital infrastructure change. People focus on the technologies, and that's digitalization. If you're just implementing a technology to help a process, these other elements are required for an overall transformation. So just be mindful of that when you're filling in your application form, that you're sort of mentioning how you're achieving this overall transformation. Okay, so then let's have a look at blockchain itself. And blockchain is one of those technologies, there's a great buzz about it at the minute. There's a lot of hype out there at the minute. There's huge expectations about what it can deliver. But really, you have to start with a good fundamental understanding about what it actually is. And I should say this is a relatively new technology as well. This is a technology that has been developed really as a result of the financial crisis is where it sort of bubbled up from back in 07, 08. So in comparison to some of the other technologies that are supported by the flexible fund, like the likes of AI that's been around from the 50s and 60s, this is a relatively new technology, and there's still a bit of development to go in it. But I'll showcase some use cases here today, and Shane will talk about his own, and that will also bring to life, where the development is and what we might still see from this technology. Before I go through the points on the slide, I just want to take a complete step back and think about, if I was to strip blockchain down, as I said, there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of literature out there at the minute, and they can talk quite complex about, it's a lot of complexity about this technology. But to boil it down to its bare bones, a blockchain is basically a place to store data and to store it rather securely. There are a lot of different security features to a blockchain that we haven't maybe had sight of before with other technologies that we're more familiar with. So I think if you were to just take a step back and say it's a place to store data, the data can take numerous forms, and there's numerous different use cases, which I'll share today as to what type of data that might be and what it might look like. But it's a place to store data in a very, very secure manner. So some of the elements of the blockchain technology here. So it mentions that it being a digital ledger of business transactions. So some data that you want to store. That is distributed across the entire network of computer systems. So this is the element that's slightly different to how we may do business today. So this talks about being distributed across the entire network of computer systems. I'll talk about different types of blockchain later, but you can have public ones which everybody can access, and you can have private ones which are more succinct and focused on a particular functionality, okay? And you only have a smaller number of players on the blockchain. But with the blockchain, it's distributed across whatever network it is. So whether it's a big network where everybody has access to, or a smaller, maybe more like akin to a business network where you might have only a number of smaller players, maybe 5, 10 players on the blockchain. And what it means that it's distributed across. So the information I have on my blockchain will be the same as the information that you have on your blockchain if we're working on the same blockchain, okay? So the same information is distributed across each of the participants of the blockchain. Now, that works very different to how we operate in business today, because if you and I were trading and you were selling me gadgets and I was purchasing them off you, you've got your books and records and you record all of that information in there. I've got my books and records over here and I record what I want here. Of course, the information that you record and I record should be the same, because if you're selling and I'm buying, there shouldn't be a discrepancy there. But at the minute, in today's world, you could put whatever you want in your books. I could do the same in mine. And neither of us would know, okay, eventually, yes, it will come out through various reconciliations, but we don't have sight of what each of us posts. Whereas this blockchain is a sort of a single source of truth where we would all post our data and we all have visibility on all of that data. So it's different to how we would operate today. So it's used for recording information that's impossible to change or hack from the network. So there are a lot of security features within the blockchain. And I could easily spend an hour just talking about those. And I don't want to lose us all in the webinar talking about those. But there are a number of unique fingerprints, digital signatures, keys that will get you onto the blockchain and broadcast your transaction, approved transactions. There's a lot of built-in security features that are different to how we would operate today. And that's one of the big attractions to blockchain, is the security features. In a blockchain, each block contains a number of transactions. And when a new transaction happens, it's recorded on each participant's ledger. So if you were selling to me 5 times in the week and you made 5 separate transactions, we would record that in the blockchain, and both you and I could see the 5 different transactions. And each transaction would go into the block. And when the block fills up, it moves on to the next block of transactions. The technology consists of encryption. That's another security feature. It doesn't have any intermediaries, making it a decentralized system. Okay, so I mentioned there that the blockchain sort of bubbled up as a result of the financial crash. And this is where people lost faith in the banks. The banks were crashing. The banks needed a lot of support from governments. And people lost faith in this central authority. And therefore, the birth of cryptocurrencies really took to stage. And it doesn't have an intermediary. So there's no central bank running the cryptocurrencies. It's a decentralized ledger. So we all have the information about the cryptocurrencies that are right there. So that's very, very different to working with that central authority like a bank or like government, whatever. Depends on what you're using it for. And in a blockchain system, the authenticity of the transaction is verified and confirmed by participants. So this is a new way of doing business as well. There is this thing called consensus within a blockchain, okay? So for a transaction to get entered onto the blockchain, there has to be consensus within the users on the blockchain. So at least 51% of the users of the blockchain have to agree to the transaction. And then if the 51% or more agree, it gets recorded on the blockchain as a valid transaction. Okay, so you can be assured that any transactions that are on that blockchain have been approved by the majority of the users of the blockchain, okay, through the consensus mechanism. Again, that's something completely different to what we're used to today in terms of recording our data. We don't need to get consensus from anyone to record information in our own ledgers, but this one we will if we're using the blockchain. So a couple of the key characteristics then, just to sort of summarize and bring that all together, it's decentralized. In other words, the users of the blockchain all have access to the same information, okay? It's immutable. There are a number of security features that will make the data really difficult to change within a blockchain. It's not completely immutable. There are ways and means of changing data, but it is very, very difficult to do so. And the consensus mechanism surely helps with that as well. User anonymity. So in other words, you know, your name and your ID isn't up there for the world to see in terms of the blockchain. So you work behind public keys and private keys when you're working on a blockchain, and they're unique identifiers, and they tend to be just a trail of letters and numbers that identify you, but no one else knows that it's you behind the transaction. So there is a bit of an anonymity there. Execution. So it allows transactions to be executed much quicker within a blockchain. And I suppose it really comes down to what you're using the blockchain for and how you set it up. But we do have a thing called smart contracts within blockchains now, which I'll talk about in a little minute. And this is where we have contracts that will automatically execute themselves without the need for human intervention once they're set up initially in the blockchain. So execution transactions can get executed much quicker with less human intervention, less chance of error. Consensus mechanism, talked about that already, just with the majority of the blockchain having to agree to the transactions that are there. And a big win for the blockchain is transparency. So the ability to see exactly the transactions that are there. And later on, we'll apply this into the supply chain space, and where we're able to see the whole journey that a product might take through the supply chain. So getting that visibility and that transparency. So again, lots of new terminology, lots of new ways of recording our transactions. So just go through where we are with blockchains at the minute and how it's developed over time. We started off, around the time of the financial crisis with blockchain version 1. It started this peer-to-peer network, so that idea of being decentralized and everybody having the same information. And that's really where the cryptocurrencies started. Blockchain 2 came along then, and it widened the capability of blockchain, and it moved into this zone of smart contracts. So I'll talk about that on the next slide. And now we're in blockchain version 3, and some actually say we're moving into version 4. But blockchain 3 then expanded the capabilities of blockchain even further. So it doesn't just now operate within the blockchain itself. It does have the capability of reaching out to other resources and working in tandem with those resources or other sources. So say, for example, you were recording transactions in foreign currency and you wanted the transactions to be translated at a particular rate on a particular day or a particular end of the month, whatever it was. your blockchain now can stretch beyond that and go to a source that you have allocated it, maybe a bank website or an FX exchange website that you believe is true and accurate in terms of exchange rates, and pull those exchange rates into the blockchain system. So it's given it a wee bit more functionality to move beyond just the remit of the blockchain itself. Okay, I mentioned smart contracts, and these are really gaining momentum within the blockchain world at the minute. So what are they? It's noted there, it's an automatically executed contract in which the conditions of the agreement between the buyer and seller are directly encoded into snippets of code. All right, so again, taking a step back from that, a smart contract is where you have a traditional contract, like we're all used to, a paper version of contract, you might sign it off, or a digital form and sign it off with all the terms and conditions. Taking out some of those terms and conditions and building them into a blockchain so that those terms and conditions will automatically execute themselves at a particular trigger point or at an event stage, or when a condition has been met that requires action to be taken, and will execute that condition or that requirement automatically. So let me give you an example. So say, for example, you were renting a property, all right, and you've got your traditional contract which outlines the premises and the parties involved, the time period involved, and most importantly, the rent payment that you're going to have to make. So when you set that up, you'll set up probably a standing order with your bank and the landlord, and that will move funds from your bank account to the landlord's bank account, and you'll come back and just make sure that whole transaction has worked out appropriately and everybody has got what they want when they needed it. So if, say, in that traditional contract it said, okay, after 8 months, your rental payments are going to increase by a certain percent, which is very typical in rental contracts. What will happen when you get to those 8 months is that you will take your contract back out. You'll check what percentage it is. Maybe it's 5% rental increase. You will have to contact the bank to make sure that they uplift the rental payments to the landlord at that particular point in time. You'll contact the landlord then to make sure that they've got the rental increase at the right stage and for the right amount. And then you'll update your own records for the uplift in the rental payment. What a smart contract would do would be to do that all automatically for you, that when it got to month 8, it would automatically uplift the rental payment by the 5% and seamlessly do that transaction for the foreseeable future after that, without the need for human intervention and without the need of all the nuance and the time that you would lose, pulling out the contract and conversing with the bank and the landlord. So it's a nice way of executing elements of a contract that need to be executed once a particular condition has been met or some kind of trigger event has been reached. So like I say, very popular in the blockchain space at the minute, and you can imagine why, bringing all the efficiencies and the reduced chance of error as a result of less human input, I suppose, at the end of it. Okay, so now I've talked a bit about blockchain. Okay, so what it is with all these new terms like being decentralized and there's consensus mechanism and it's highly secure. But how does it work? Okay, so if you were to practically get onto a blockchain, what would it look like and how would it operate? And this diagram will bring us through on the journey. So we start off by requesting a transaction. So you would log on to your blockchain using your personal ID, and you would create the transaction. So if you were wanting to sell me, those 100 gadgets, you would create that on the blockchain. That then gets broadcasted from your initial creation of that transaction to everybody on the network. So if there was me, you, and 5 other people on the network, we would all get indication that this transaction is looking to be approved, that you sold me the 100 gadgets and you want this transaction to be approved. And all the users on the blockchain that are required for this part of the transaction would then either approve or otherwise the transaction. Okay, and once that consensus then is reached, the transaction is approved and it goes on to the blockchain itself. So therefore, when you look at the transactions on the blockchain, they're the ones that are fully approved by the majority of the people in the blockchain. So less chance of fraudulent transactions getting on there, and less chance of erroneous transactions as well getting on there, because you have a large number of eyes looking at the transaction. And depending how the blockchain is set up, these approvals can be manual or they can be automatic as well. Okay, so it doesn't always have to be a human being that will approve the transaction. And then, yes, as I said there, once it goes onto the blockchain, it's complete, it's deemed to be a complete and accurate transaction from there. So when you see a transaction, you have the assurance that it has gone through this process before it gets there, and there's less chance of it being incorrect or inaccurate. So the benefits of this then, so enhanced security. So the chances of, like I said, a fraudulent transaction getting on there or an incorrect transaction getting on there are reduced, because there are a number of those security features like the sign-in and the unique fingerprint that you have, or unique digital signature that you have to create the transaction, to approve the transaction, the consensus mechanism. Reduce costs. So, you can imagine if you come at the end of a period and you have all your transactions, say, for example, all your purchases in one place, agreed with your suppliers, all in the blockchain, and you come then to sort of do your reconciliations at the end of a period. Having all those transactions approved with your suppliers can be of a great benefit. And equally, if you had it on the sales side, agreed with your customers is a great benefit, and will save a lot of that sort of reconciliation time. It can also alleviate a lot of, which ultimately, will reduce cost. But it can also reduce a lot of human intervention, human time spent processing transactions. So again, reducing down the cost and efficiency with which the transactions can be recorded and analysed. And that links into my next point there. Traceability. So there is traceability across the blockchain, and you have the ability to go back and see transactions that happened X period of time ago. So they're all there for safekeeping and to go back and review or analyze transactions that have happened before. And that's why it worked really well within the supply chain, because you do have that backward focus to follow the journey of a particular transaction right from the beginning to the middle to the end for a period of time. Immutability. So yeah, the idea that transactions cannot be tampered with. So again, if you're in a private blockchain, you have to be invited on there before you can do anything on that blockchain. So it means that, a random person in the public can't come onto your blockchain and start trying to put transactions on there. So there are, security features, even before you get on the blockchain, and then security features built into the blockchain to get transactions onto it. So that helps with the immutability side of it. And then transparency as well. So the fact that, yes, you can go back and trace transactions, but then equally everybody has sight of the transactions, or certainly everybody who's on the blockchain has sight of the transactions. Okay, so hopefully that provides a bit of a background to you in terms of what blockchain is. So remember, it's a place to store data. It's decentralized, so everybody has copies of it. You can't get a transaction on there unless there's consensus within the blockchain to do that. Provides traceability. It provides transparency and helps to prevent fraud and incorrect transactions being recorded. So that's it sort of at a high level. Now I want to try and move into where you might actually utilize this with a focus on supply chain and how it can bring value to supply chains. And then we will look at some use cases. So in terms of supply chain, I've put up here a couple of points that to help you reflect on where you might see the benefit within your own supply chains. First of all, to develop. So if you think about it, if you're able to trace a product right from the beginning of the supply chain to the end, it gives you a much greater bank of information about the authenticity of the product, the detail about the product, what it can do, what it can't do, how to store it, what are the conditions required. And that's really good, in the space of, maybe R&D, particularly where you're developing maybe new products and you're having to use inputs and you want to know about those inputs. What journey have they come on? Are they ethically sourced? Do they meet the spec of what I need in my R&D project? And to have that authenticated by all the users on the blockchain. So it means when you're designing your project and you're developing your new products, you're more in a closed loop, what we call closed loop design, because you have all the information available in one place to help you make the decisions. So it can be good from an R&D perspective. Super good at planning, okay, because you can interact and understand more with your suppliers, okay? So you will have traceability of where your products are, who they're with, in what numbers and batches are they coming. So it allows you then to plan your own operations on the ground and your own production, your own inventory levels, and maybe any risks that you might foresee coming down the line. So you can identify them earlier, react to them, and try and mitigate them. It allows you also to source products a lot more cheaply maybe than in the past, because the information that you might need in order to determine which products you want to go with or which raw materials you want to use, the information about those products could be sitting there in blockchains for you to access, review, and then make your decisions on. So sourcing of materials can become a lot easier. In terms of making, then down the bottom here, it can help make decisions around outsourcing a lot easier. Okay, so again, looking at the types of products that you might want to outsource. Having the information on the blockchain about the spec of it, about what journey it's come on, who had processed it, where did it originate from, can then give you the information as to for you to determine whether or not you actually want to outsource, or whether it's something that you're better off making yourself and have more control over. But it's going to give you the visibility over areas that you would have had before, but it would have taken a lot of time and effort for you to get this information, whereas now it could be coming in a nice, neat blockchain, and it's all authenticated by the users along the way. Can also be good on the delivery side of things in the supply chain to give you visibility over where your products are, and that could be products coming into your supply chain, or if you're, the other side, distributing them out to your customers. So having visibility on that. And then the last one here, just about returns. Okay, so if you had to do a product recall, or you had to take back a number of products for whatever reason, you have greater visibility of where those products have come from and where they have went to. And certainly this has been one of the greatest things within the food industry, where you may have maybe contaminated food and a product recall having to be done at short notice. Being able to actually track and trace where the products are that are infected and getting them off the shelves as quickly as possible is very, very valuable. And the benefit of blockchain there, we'll see it in a little minute with Walmart, who have used it to do such things. So a lot more efficient and effective in terms of trying to do those product recalls. So lots of different areas within the supply chain that you might want to think about. But then also looking at it another way, looking at it as part of the parties along the supply chain. And as you know, supply chains can be quite intricate, or they can be quite wholesome as well in terms of the number of parties that are part of a supply chain. But I've just tried to streamline it here to show, well, if I was along this supply chain, what benefit would a blockchain bring to me? So if I was a supplier, trying to supply maybe goods that I was saying that are going to be ethically sourced, or they have come from X parts of the world that are accredited to produce these types of products. By doing so on a blockchain, I am able to provide the authenticity around that. I'm able to provide the transparency to say that, yes, I am an ethical supplier, and here's my evidence to show that. If I am a manufacturer then and taking in these raw materials, then I am able to benefit from a blockchain by having data transparency from this shared ledger. So I know with what I'm going to manufacture and ultimately sell on, I am able to say with a fair degree of confidence that these products have went through this process, and now this is me doing my process to build it up in the next stage. So I have the visibility and the transparency of what has went before, and then what I offer to as part of my process. Really important from a regulatory point of view as well, particularly maybe where they are authenticating or providing certification on particular products or processes. To being able to have the visibility that, yes, this product does meet the regulatory standards, this product does meet the sourcing requirements for a particular grant or a particular license or a particular certification. So again, and it's not just relying on the word of the manufacturer, but relying on any parties that were ahead of them in that process. So they're all individually authenticated by the parties on the blockchain. A logistics company, a blockchain could help me understand well, where is my product coming down the line? Where am I shipping it out to? And maybe also understanding, well, what conditions do I need to store or move these products in? Okay, so if I am getting some kind of certification around a particular product and it has to be stored or moved in a particular way, I want to have sight of that, and I want to know that it's true and valid in terms of what I'm required to do. If I'm a wholesaler, then I want to be able to manage stock levels. Absolutely. I don't want to have too much stock, but equally, I don't want to have not enough stock in a warehouse. So being able to, again, understand what's happening from the logistical company coming in front of me, and again, thinking about, is there any special storage conditions that I need to meet in order to make sure this product gets the customer in the right spec. As a retailer, okay, lots of retailers offering products that are sustainably sourced or ethically sourced or sourced from different parts of the world. And you know, as consumers, we don't have much oversight in terms of, you know, where the product has actually come from. We are relying on what the retailer is telling us, and we are relying on the legislation around what they can tell us, but we don't have sight of what's happened really here. So from a retailer's perspective, for them to be able to make the claims and to be selling products the way that they want to sell and attract customers who might be interested in buying products of this particular brand or this particular origin, then having the ability to show the journey the product has went on becomes very valuable to them. And lastly, then, as a consumer, yes, we want to know more now. We're moving into an era where we want to understand better where our products are coming from. We want to be able to have assurance over where it has been sourced, you know, what production process it's went through to make sure that it's meeting our values and our beliefs as individuals. So the provision of that information becomes very, very valuable to us as users. So right along the supply chain, value can be obtained from the blockchain. In terms of benefits, then, there's a number of different benefits here. I've probably mentioned most of them already in terms of security. This one here, global compatibility. You know, supply chains are now you're not just trading with people down the road from you. It is on a global scale. They are wider and more varied. And therefore, the traceability across those supply chains becomes ever more important. And to be able to trust the journey that those products have went through on that supply chain becomes important. So blockchain is one way in which we can gather and provide that information. Provenance, the ability to show where your product has come from, that demand is coming from customers. We are now placing more of an emphasis in terms of our own values and beliefs on products, and therefore we want the products we buy from different retailers to be able to meet that. Accelerated process, absolutely, from the point of view of you know, particularly the smart contracts, executing contracts much more quicker. Maintaining ethical supply chain. Yeah, depending on the pathway of the product, that could be one way of proving that ethical supply chain, and absolutely can reduce the cost of the transactions. We're reducing those intermediaries along the way, and we're getting everybody to certify as they go. Okay, so just then comparing maybe where we are today in terms of supply chain versus what blockchain might be able to offer us within the supply chain around data integrity, security verification, and then government regulations. So at the minute, our data integrity is not tamper-proof, okay? So when a product moves from A to B to C, there tends to be a lot of paperwork that follows with that, but that is open to manipulation and tampered and fraudulently, you know, being signed off or whatever it is along the way. A blockchain is tamper-proof because, you know, as an individual, you're invited on, you are the person who has shipped the goods, you are the person who has processed the goods or manufactured the goods. So it is more tamper-proof. Security of the data. In a traditional way, at the minute, the data tends to be held by one or maybe two bodies where the information, you know, is centralized. If anything happened, one or two of those bodies, the whole thing could fall apart and the information is lost. Whereas with the decentralized approach in the blockchain, where everybody has the information, it doesn't matter if somebody's system goes down because all the other players on the blockchain has that data as well. Data verification, we have it achieved here in the blockchain because all the parties along the blockchain will tick it all off as it goes. And it's obviously not achieved then in the traditional means. It's not achieved with any kind of, I suppose, assurance. You're not assured that whoever has ticked off the data has done so and they're supposed to have done so. And then government regulation. So if you're a company that's saying we meet the regulation X, Y, or Z, the blockchain will allow you to achieve that through authentication. Okay, so nobody gets on that blockchain unless they're supposed to be there and they have a purpose to be there. Whereas right now, you don't have that authentication protocol. So, the government is relying on, what is an organization is telling them and what maybe paperwork they have. But we all know with paperwork, it can be skewed right or left. If the organization is that way inclined, the blockchain provides much more assurance around that process. Okay, so just want to cover up a quick few slides here just around where we see this within the food industry, and then I'll let Shane talk about his examples in the beverage industry. And the food supply chain was one of the biggest areas that, as I say, we see the blockchain being utilized, and that's because there are a number of different issues within the food supply chain. We have issues with food safety, with sustainability, food fraud and wastage as well. And then brand trust. So do we trust if something has a particular label on it that has actually come from that manufacturer or that producer? We're not sure, but blockchain is one way in which it can help all of those elements. And it doesn't matter whether you're over this end of the blockchain as a producer into the supply chain or over the far end of the supply chain as a consumer. You have better visibility for elements that are more important to you within the blockchain, within that supply chain itself. So Walmart was one of the companies that has been working on blockchain for a number of years. It started back in 2016, there's a timeline shows, and they used it on their pork and mango tracing. Okay, so they wanted to trace the movements of their pork and mango. And this is really to develop a proof of concept, okay, to try it really to see if it would work before expanding it wider within the organization. And so what they did, they tracked their pork through China, okay? And as a result of using the blockchain to do this, they were able to upload certificates of integrity along the blockchain as it moved from A to B, and it moved from processor, it moved from a logistics company, or it moved to a retailer. So they're able to authenticate at each point in time the movements that the pork went on. And in the US then, from a mango perspective, they wanted to trace the movement of mangoes through the US, right from farm to the retailer shelf. And what they found when they used the blockchain was that they were able to trace the movement of their mangoes. They were able to reduce it from 7 days. So it took them 7 days for them to be able to trace it in their old system to 2.2 seconds with blockchain. Okay, because all the data was centrally stored, authenticated, and they were assured over the process and the pathway that the mangoes took throughout the US, and were able to identify went from this farmer, ended up on these shelves within the US. So that's quite a significant change, going from 7 days of tracing to 2.2 seconds. So that was so successful for them. Then the following year, they moved wider and they joined the IBM Food Trust, which is a collaboration of large enterprises in the US, trying to develop blockchains for supply chain, and mostly in the food industry. And they continue to do that. And they've moved, the latest one there is their lush green vegetables, and they've moved it onto blockchain. And that arose out of a result of an E. coli outbreak that Walmart had a number of years ago in America. And they weren't able to trace, the source of the E. coli outbreak, or where in America the affected products landed in terms of the shop shelves. And so what had to happen in the interest of public safety is that all the lush green vegetables had to be removed from the shelves. And that obviously led to a lot of wastage when maybe only a small proportion of it was infected with E. coli. So they moved on their vegetables in that direction, and they found the benefit from it. So they've now expanded further. They have meat and poultry, dairy as well, and multi-ingredient products. So they're now starting to see the benefit from utilizing the technology. And lastly, and I've already sort of covered this just around public or private blockchain. So A public blockchain is one where, you don't have to be invited on. You can go and just trade on it. So if anyone's involved in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or Ethereum, you're transacting on public blockchains. Or they're also called permissionless. What's probably going to be more relevant for businesses is going to be what's known as permissioned blockchains. And they're more private, centrally controlled blockchains where you invite people onto the blockchain, or parties or organizations on, only if they have a reason to be there. Okay, so you want them there is a purpose for them coming onto the blockchain to either to verify or to authenticate whatever part of the process in with the supply chain or whatever else that you want them to do. So just a couple of things to be aware of there. That's just a comparison between public and private. I'll let you sort of maybe read that in your own time. You can see there the private blockchains are faster, higher efficiency, and the read and write access is for a single organization. So you tend to have somebody who sets up the blockchain and invites people onto it, rather than the public blockchain where, as I said earlier, anyone can join and therefore have read and write access to the information. Okay, so look, if you're thinking of implementing a blockchain, and Shane will be able to tell us on his journey how he implemented, but as a starter for 10 and put a bit of a framework around what you might want to do, first of all is educate yourselves. Okay, so get a firm understanding of what the technology is about, what it's capable of delivering, but equally what it's not capable of delivering. Educate yourself and stakeholders. So it's not just going to impact you. There's other people involved. Maybe there's investors, maybe there's customers, maybe there's suppliers, or maybe it's the employees who are going to be having some part to play on this blockchain. What's your use case going to be then? So identify where you actually want to use it. Then form teams. So who is going to actually take ownership? Who's going to be held accountable? Who's going to drive the project forward? So if you don't assign it and have that accountability framework around it, then it's likely not going to be a success. Develop proof of concept, just like Walmart did with their pork and their mangoes. Look to see where you could have a taster with this to see if it will deliver what you think it's going to deliver and the value that you want it to deliver. And then, so once you have established that, analyze the data. So look to see what happened in your trial or your pilot. And then if it works, then develop a plan to implement it on a broader scale in the organization. A couple of big entities using blockchain at the minute. So I spoke of Walmart there. We have Ford are using it for cobalt supplies, really important part of the electric vehicles, the batteries for those cobalt. So being able to actually authenticate and have that transparency of where the supplies have come from for that is of value to them. De Beers have been using it for years. They're the diamond company, massive fraudulent black market rather for diamonds, as you can imagine, with the amount of money involved. And they really want to set themselves apart and offer a unique selling point for their customers to say, look, we can prove the authenticity of your diamond, that when you buy a De Beers diamond from us, we can give you the traceability of all the pathway that diamond has come from right back to where it was originally sourced. And that should help weed out any other suppliers who can't provide that authenticity because they're providing fraudulent goods. And then we have some of the logistics companies using it as well. And then just to wrap up, blockchain as a service. So if you did want to test this out, where, in terms of a trial run or without actually investing in the blockchain technology itself, there are lots of providers out there that can do it as a service. So it's a cloud-based system that operates all the back-end part of the blockchain technology, so you don't have to invest in the development of that technology. I've just listed a few of them here and the different types of platforms that they provide. So it will be a good source for you to at least start your research on. Some of the challenges then, scalability. So I'm sure Shane will mention that in his, it's very hard to scale it up right across the organization. It might work for a particular product base or particular supplier base, but to scale it up can be difficult and it can be quite slow as well in terms of processing transactions. So you do need to think about, where exactly you're going to use it. Immutability can be seen as a drawback because we're all humans. We do make errors. So if we do have to go back and change it, it's not impossible to do, but it's very costly and time consuming to do that. You do need to read your consensus mechanism. There is that consensus mechanism there. Again, if it's to be approved by human beings, you're still dealing with that human element, so if somebody's off sick or, ill or that can slow down the transactions getting onto the blockchain. there's not that many people out there who know a lot about it, and there was few developers. So that sort of can be a challenge as well, and a lack of regulation. So there is no sort of blockchain act of 2024 out there that you can rely on in terms of this technology. There's movements in that direction, but nothing solid at the minute in terms of that. So a few challenges. And my last slide there is just a takeaway for you to really just pulls together everything I have presented to date. Okay, so I'll wrap up there and I'll pass over to Shane. And Shane, I'm looking forward to hearing your journey of what you experienced with blockchain. I'll let you maybe just do an introduction and then I'll maybe play your video.
Yeah, no problem, Brenda. Thanks very much for that. I think you covered a lot of the technical aspects that we certainly went through when we were developing our product, and yeah, lots of the value adds for our end, you know, is very much about the transparency and proof of concept and verification of a product, but also the stakeholders in supply chain. So yeah, Brendan's going to play a little video shortly, but this really takes us through the development of a product called Downstream. And Downstream is really all about the downstream of data to the consumer, empowering the consumer, also empowering the retailer, the logistics provider. So I think we were one of the first companies to completely put a product onto the blockchain technology and do that full transparency of supply chain and put it out to the market. So yeah, I'll let the video play, and then afterwards I'll go through a little bit of the story and some of the hurdles that we come up against in making it commercially viable.
Downstream is the world's first beer to use blockchain technology to showcase everything you want to know about the beer, including its ingredients and the brewing methods, the people and the process involved in making the beer. We contract brew Downstream at Boyne Brewhouse in Drogheda in Ireland, and we sell it currently into Marks and Spencer's in the UK, some online subscription sites such as Honest Brew and Flavourly in the UK, and we've even exported it to Singapore to date. Our ambition is to make Downstream an exportable product across the globe, and so we're working on some new markets presently. The beers that we have to date in the Downstream range include Hybrid, which is an Indian Pale Lager, Token, a Session IPA, Autonomy, a Juicy Pale Ale, and Babel, which is a Pilsner. So on the front of our cans of Downstream there is a QR code, which most people don't really know what to do with a QR code, but nowadays there's a built-in feature on iOS cameras that it automatically picks it up. Or if you're an Android, you might need a QR reader. The consumer can scan and it brings them to a unique site that tells them when their beer was made. It's time-stamped and geolocated to the brewery. It tells you the people involved, all the events and raw materials, including their information like their batch codes. And it gives the consumer a lot of interactivity into how it was made. We'll always be looking for new beers to bring out and new ways of showcasing the story and the provenance of our products through digital storybooks.
Yeah, so that's a little overview, I suppose, from Liam, one of the other co-founders of Downstream, and what originally kind of, I would say, initiated us in this journey was the why, you know, and for us, when you're a small player or a small business, you're kind of like, you're up against big business. So especially in the food and drink industry, a lot of the big commercial businesses have a lot more spending power. So for us, we found a lot of what people would call pseudo craft beer or fake craft beer coming out on shelves. So a lot of consumers would perhaps think that they are supporting local business or their money is going back to full circle economy, where, you know, actually 80 to 90% of what was on the supermarket shelves was all going to the same company or the same PLC. So, you know, that was one of the big reasons that we wanted to really look at this sector in terms of, well, you know, when you go back in time and you look at when labels were invented and why they were invented, it was against robbery in local retailers. And we thought, we've moved a long way with technology. Perhaps there was a way of integrating robust technology into everyday label. And I think we've come a long way in the last 10 years, 10 to 20 years in both technology and integration, both within products and lifestyle. So having a little bit of knowledge in the area of fintech, I began a journey with the team in how we might integrate that. And as Brenda was saying, you have your public blockchain and your private blockchain. And I think there's a little bit of confusion sometimes in the market, especially around perhaps the area of cryptocurrency, where they tend to grab the headlines because want people get drawn by maybe making money quickly. But this is probably one of the most robust use cases, I would say. The kind of sector of Bitcoin where they are built on a blockchain, and it's immutable and it's never been cracked. So if you're to do that within a supply chain, it really holds the exact same advantages. So when we went out, we started working with a blockchain company called Darknet at the time, and we were working, as we said in the video, with Boyne Brewhouse. But over time, we ended up moving to a larger entity. So again, as shown in this presentation, the likes of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're all starting to offer kind of track and trace, but on another level of immutability and transparency. So we ended up working with a company called GPass in our latest run of downstream beers, and they're actually a spin-off of IBM, Microsoft. But to us, that made it commercially viable. And when I say commercially viable, we had to get our beer product on shelf without any price difference. So even though we were adding this level of technology, the consumer shouldn't have to pay an extra £1, £2, £3, £4. We had to find a solution to integrate it onto the label process. So as we explained on the QR code, which is at the moment probably the most commercially viable way of giving that level of verification. And when we did this maybe 5-6 years ago is actually when we launched this into the market. This was pre-COVID, so QR codes were maybe not as highly utilized off, but more so in Asian markets, QR codes were used a lot more, and that was one of the reasons that we put the QR code front and center of the branding to make it easier for the consumer to verify and engage. So if I go on to the next slide, I'll actually, if anyone who has their phone on them at the moment, as I said, you can actually hold it up to the QR code on this slide, and you should get an idea of what you get when you scan the QR code. So you really get a verification of, yes, this is a product that has come from where it says it comes from. So it's proven provenance, it's proven authenticity, and it gives you a verification code. So it really is a step towards anti-fraud as well. But also, as Brenda mentioned with Walmart and some of the bigger corporations, the likes of Marks and Spencers and big retail, this transparency in supply chain, if there was a contamination within the product, it allows them to recall the product or find exactly the batch of products within a couple of seconds. Whereas we have seen it can take up to 7 to 10 days to actually locate that in such a large corporation. So there's a huge time saving for large retailers when this level of transparency from a supplier, and especially small suppliers, because more and more big retail want to work with small suppliers. They want that local provenance. The consumer wants it, and that's what's driving it. So that to us was a big value add. And we actually didn't push this into retail. The retailer came to us and asked to take the product on because of the big value add this level of transparency would give them. So that was another big value add for us. But I think the biggest hurdle, and sometimes people, maybe going through a lot of the technicalities, I really think of this in terms of track and trace. And if you're a small company and you want to prove provenance and you want to show integrity of what you're about and the people behind the product, this is great technology to reinforce that. And a lot of it runs in the background. So I would say you don't need a large level of technical or software knowledge. When you implement it or bring on the company to work with you on it, they will hold a lot of that technical knowledge. It's really, working with them hand in hand and to give them maybe the needed branded assets or some of the digital, which we mentioned at the very start, the digitization. A lot of it might be given in the digitization of your product of what happens on a daily basis, and then they'll take it to the next step. And then coming back to the commercially viable, we were able to get this to about 1p per label. So when we were running this on batches of maybe 30,000-40,000 units, and then as you scale up, it becomes cheaper. So that was probably the biggest hurdle that we had to overcome. At the moment, we are looking at again for the whiskey world and luxury items. But I would say, once you get a good blockchain partner on board, that becomes a big kind of helping hand if you are looking at this from a small business perspective. And I think, which was really explained well today, is there's way more value adds and upside in this, and there's so many I think other aspects that will perhaps be mandated down the line, whether that's sustainability of the product or even mandates around the carbon footprint of the product, or the other pieces that we've looked into, or even integrating smart contracts. So if someone has an allergy or needs to check if a product is gluten-free, actual software being able to run right across your supply chain and actually verify if your product has this allergen in it, then it would mean a big red X that they shouldn't be eating it, they shouldn't be drinking it. So they're the type of I suppose technologies that can overlap with one another, but it's certainly lots of value adds. I find the more transparency you can bring into that, in terms of sustainability, and then even ethical uses, that you're supporting local employment and where exactly the ingredients are coming from. One other point that I would make, sometimes, especially in the food and drink world, being too transparent may allow for copycats. So if someone went in and seen the full recipe of your beer, they could go out and copycat that. But I think that comes down to the talent of brewers and artists, you might call them, that they can never replicate a great product. So we didn't get too put off by being too transparent. And for us, if you're doing things great and other people want to copy, then it just means more great products are coming to the market. So that's some of our journey, and of course I'd like to open up the floor to anyone that maybe has questions around it, if they are thinking about integrating this into their business.
Thank you, Shane. I'll maybe just cover up one or two slides just in terms of further support, just to give people time to digest maybe what you've said there, and we'll pick up the questions in a few minutes, just conscious of time there as well, but we're doing okay. So look, if after hearing what we have presented today gives you an appetite to think about this further for your own organization, and you want a little bit more help and support around this, this slide here highlights a number of different bodies that can help. Okay, so as part of the Transformation Fund, there is links with the further education colleges, with ourselves here at Queen's, with you as well, who have a smart manufacturing hub, if that's going to be your space, local authorities, or even, maybe you have advisors to your organizations as well. In terms of what these bodies can offer, there's a lot more information about that on the website, so I'm not going to go into the detail here about that. So just their link is there, so you can go and see what are the specialisms of each of these bodies that might help sort of steer you in the right direction. But I will just highlight, just from our own perspective here at Queen's, different types of things that we do that might be of use for you. So we do have what's called a business clinic here, and this is us out engaging with organizations, looking to see where we, as either academics or indeed our students or graduates, can help maybe with specific consultancy type projects, or data geo-mentoring is all about analyzing data and helping organizations maybe understand their data, build dashboards. If there was a piece of work maybe that you have sitting there that you would love to get time to do, and you're thinking, if I had a student or a bit of guidance or someone to help with that, that'd be great. Please come and knock on our door, because we'd be really, really happy to hear from you. Wider than that, we would have a number of executive education programs that would help support in this technology space. So if you wanted to learn more about the various types of technologies, or take a bit more of a deep dive into some of them, we have a series of programs such as the Digital Transformation Toolbox program, and then we have business analytics and data analytics and decision making. So again, I mentioned on my other slide earlier on, the first thing to do is, educate yourself, get to know as much about these technologies as possible. They're huge investments, either both in terms of time and resource and money. So the more that you can understand about them, the better. So they might be of interest. So feel free to go and have a look at the Leadership Institute website, and you'll pick up some of those points. I mentioned at the outset about the continued series of these webinars. So we do have another 5 coming up in the next 5 weeks, covering big data, smart technologies, AI and machine learning, and then immersive technology. So between the blockchain and these, they cover the range of technologies that are offered by the Flexible Fund. And then lastly, there is a digital transformation workshop. This is going to be a really useful session, because as part of the application for the Transformation Fund, you have to put together a digital transformation plan, okay? And there's a number of different things that you're being asked to put in there. And this last session on the 25th of June will be really supportive in terms of helping you determine what needs to go in there, and what needs to go in there, and how you go about pulling it together, and the types of information that would be useful, and then how you would execute that as well. So do come along to any of those that takes your fancy, or if you're any more relevant than others. But then lastly, that workshop would be really beneficial to put that transformation plan together. So keep that in mind. At this point, then, I'll open it up to any questions, if there's any from participants, either for myself or Shane. So I think you can either unmute yourself or just type it into the chat function. I don't see any coming through, Shane. So either we've answered all their questions, or we've completely bamboozled them with all things blockchain. Let's hope it's the former and not the latter. Yeah. Well, look, if there's no questions coming through, we'll not hold anyone any longer than they need to be here. If you do have anything, oh, sorry, there's one coming through there. Can it support a blockchain project? Yes, it can, Russell. Blockchain is one of the supported technologies. So there's 6 covered by the Transformation Fund, and blockchain is one of them. Absolutely, yeah. If anyone does have follow-up questions after the session, feel free to get in touch with us at the Clinton Leadership Institute, and we'll certainly try and answer your questions offline. But other than that, I just want to say a thank you to Shane for coming along today, sharing his story on blockchain. It's great to see an NI business utilising the technology like blockchain in a very successful way. And thank you to everyone else for coming and listening to the webinar today. It's been a pleasure. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thanks, Brenda.
Bye now.
See ya.